Okay, today I decided I was going to make a ring out of some old scrap composite material I have. It's like a resin impregnated wood, and this is the arbor I came up with to try and hold it in the lathe. Ultimately ended up being a disaster. So I'm just gonna cut a little lump of this material out. You can see that it's a piece of scrap from an old CNC project that didn't really turn out the way I hoped it would. And then I'm going to nip the corners off to make it turn in the lathe easier. You don't want big sharp protrusions banging into your tool real fast. So I just kind of took the corners off to round it out and make it easier to turn. Be careful with your fingers so close to the saw blade. I'm not putting any pressure on it, so if it just wants to jump in there, it's probably not gonna take my fingers with it. So I'm just gonna use some of my trusty Gorilla Glue gel to hold this onto the arbor. I just want to get it close to the center. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm going to be turning it down anyway. So here's the lathe. It's small, but it can probably get the job done. And I'm going to chuck it up in here. And I'm going to be using this small indexable carbide bit. And that's what it looks like all chucked up. So I didn't know if the glue was going to hold to the arbor, so I took real light passes at first. But once the workpiece became more round, I felt more comfortable taking off more material per pass. And I'm just going to turn this down to roughly the diameter I think it should be. I didn't take any real measurements for this. It's just a trial. Here it is from a different angle, just because. And you can see that that's probably a little bit thick for a ring, so I'm going to go ahead and face it down here and take some of that thickness out. Thick is good, but there is such thing as too thick, particularly in regards to rings. The arbor seems to be holding up pretty well so far, but I run into a snag with that. So next I'm going to use a file very carefully so I don't hit anything or hit my thumbs, to kind of give this ring that rounded over outside edge that rings typically have. I could have done this afterwards, but I just wanted to see what the general profile was going to look like. So here's where disaster number one happens. I had forgotten that super glue breaks down in heat. So when I push this drill bit through into the aluminum, it generates heat, and that heat was enough to break down the super glue. So the whole thing slips off the arbor, but I also suspect when you see me pull the ring away, there's some discoloration. I think that the glue was also having some sort of chemical reaction with something in this wood composite material. So I glued the crap out of it. I coated the whole thing. I coated the arbor, I coated the ring, We're going to go back in with a slightly larger drill bit and try to open up that hole a little bit more. But again, at this point the glue wasn't curing, and I'm pretty sure that's because of some sort of chemical reaction. So I decided to just chuck it up in the jaws and get it as true as I could. It's not going to be perfect, but it works. I was also concerned about clamping it down in the jaws. Would it snap the ring? Because it is just a wood composite after all, and now it's going to be hollow with pressure on the outside of it. But it worked. I should have done it from the beginning. And then I'll go in with the boring bar and take real light passes until the inner diameter seems about right. Again, I didn't take any measurements for this, but just to kind of learn a different process for doing this, and I would never do it this way again, obviously, because of the issues I had with the work holding. So next I turned the arbor down so I could slide the ring on and sand the outside. I went through a couple different grits. I'm pretty sure this is a 220, and then I had some 320 emery paper that I used right here just to get it all nice and smooth. And finally I got some polishing compound on an old scrap of leather and very carefully polished the outside and the inside. I think it turned out okay. Obviously I learned a lot doing this in terms of how to hold such a small fragile thing in the lathe. And these are what it looks like afterwards. The grain turned out nice. The finish turned out nice. The pictures, not so much, but we're going to work on that.